And so good afternoon and welcome, as it's just gone midday, to this, the Preparing to Reopen for Hospitality. We know already that the guidelines have been issued and the statements have already been made, announcing that parts of hospitality will begin to open. And there is a timetable for all of that. I'm delighted to say that joining us to discuss that reopening and some of the preparation that is going to be needed, we are joined by Caroline Maffia, who looks after contact tracing and enforcement strategy, among many other things. Hello. Simon Soar, who's the Chief Executive of the I'm the Chamber of Commerce. This is the Jersey Hospitality. I've given you the wrong job title for a minute there, Simon. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for this being a joint Chamber and JHA production, if you like. Marc Hurst is an environmental health consultant, and he joins us as well. Marc, good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. And Ruth Johnson, Head of Policy, will be joining us a little bit later in the call. Simon, you and I have been working on a day like today for quite some time, and obviously looking at those that have already joined us, and we're up to 70 already of the 100 or so that have registered for today. This has been eagerly awaited. You've had a good look at the guidance. Some areas of clarification I think are really important. You've had lots of emails and I've had lots of emails this morning. What's the biggest question you've had so far?
Thank you, Murray. I think we've both seen the sort of similar themes coming through on the questions. The first was a little bit of confusion over people sat at the same table from different households. The way it can read in the guidance is that you must be 2 meters away from those from different households. We've had clarity this morning and sent it out to members. The one table distancing is where you have a very large table which can host multiple groups on. There are several venues that have almost these bench-like seating. The idea is you can have a mixed group of up to 10 people, but they are classed as one group, one bubble, and they can sit together. Your bubble must remain 2 meters away from everyone else though, and that's person to person. And that I think is one of the main important bits we need to get around. Tables are restricted at 10 though. We cannot go above 10.
Right, so 10 at a table. They can be from different households, but they are then at one table viewed as one group, and they must be 2 meters from another group. Correct. That's person to person 2 meters, not table to table 2 meters. So when people are getting their tape measures out, Caroline, it's really important to emphasize this. This is about 2 meters from person to person. That's going to be a little bit further away for the tables, isn't it?
It is, and the way that we have been giving advice to the industries that are already open and obviously have the 2 meters distancing in their queue systems is to not forget that people have, bums and noses basically front and back. So actually we're talking about 2.2 meters in reality, to be confident that that those chairs are actually not going to have the individuals sort of facing one another before that point in view. So yeah, it's using that side of things, recognizing that with your measuring, you're measuring people, not 2-inch strips on the floor or anything like that.
Okay, that was certainly the most popular question that Simon and I's email came through was in terms of the table of 10. There was some confusion there. I know that is being clarified on the guidelines as we speak, so you will be able to see that much clearer. This is about a table of 10 distance from another table of 10. And the table of 10 that you've got does not have to sit 2 meters apart from each other. That may be misinterpreted in the guidelines. That is not what is meant. So from all of that, Marc, we've done webinars previously with other sectors, and I don't want to dwell too much on that, but non-essential and then close contact. Have we learned lessons over this period of reopening other sectors? Because that was part of the design, was to open them sector by sector so that we could go through a process. So just looking back on that process, it seems to have been successful for a couple of those sectors already.
Yeah, it has. We've been really impressed with these people that have been opening. We've actually set up some COVID teams. We've got several teams that can visit your premises. And this has been really helpful and it's been well received. And the things I like is we're being told, we're going into these places with our COVID teams, we're being told, we thought of everything. And when we finished with the little talk, they said, didn't think of that one. Didn't think of that. Thanks very much. It's just advice, and if you want us to come and send our team in there, please email me, email the group, and we'll send a team in to advise you and help you.
Yeah, well, it's been very worthwhile. We've got lots and lots of questions coming in, and I'm going to go to those questions pretty quickly. We are hoping that Ruth will be joining us. I know she's having difficulty joining us at the moment, but we will try and address that issue during this call. In the meantime, Caroline, it's going to be down to you, I'm afraid, to answer some of those questions. And I'm sure you're up to it. Just have one question that's just this second dropped in, and if you've got a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen that you're looking at, and if you're looking at that, then please do put your question in there, and it'll pop up in front of all of us, and then we'll get to it. A question with regard to having a group of 10 people. Can a group of 10 people book and come together to sit down without food, but to have non-alcoholic drinks? Because that's an area that people are saying, well, you know, if I want to go and have coffee, or I want to go and have some fruit juices with some friends, can I do that in a table of 10? Caroline, I think that's quite a quick answer for you, isn't it?
Yes, very quick. The substantial meal element actually kicks in with the introduction of alcohol. So if it's non-alcoholic drinks, then you don't need the meal. So if you want to meet friends for coffee and a cake or something like that, then that's absolutely fine within the guidance. The alcohol and substantial meal are the two things that link in directly together.
So if you're having a substantial meal, I'm going to come back to you actually, Simon, on this, just to explain this a little. I know Ruth has just joined us, and it's great to have you with us, Ruth. In fact, welcome, Ruth. We're just talking about substantial food. It's connected to alcohol, and you can go and have non-alcoholic drinks as a group of up to 10 people, such as going for coffee, space allowing. So just to clarify that position, the idea of substantial food and what substantial food means, and we'll come to that in a minute, that only applies once you're having alcoholic drinks.
So I mean to jump in on for now. So yeah, substantial meal. The point which has been raised in the chats we've been in, Murray, is you're looking sort of breakfast, lunch, dinner, a full afternoon tea. So not just, you know, a little scone. A full afternoon tea is acceptable. You have to be prepared, if this was taken to court, to be able to justify that the meal was a substantial one to be drinking with. You know, while we don't want to say a Scotch egg is dismissed, I think the point that was raised is if you just passed a Scotch egg to eat out of your hand, that's probably not a substantial meal. If it's served with a salad and on a plate with a full plate done up, and it would be a substantial meal for yourself, that may be what you'd eat for lunch, then that is classed. But it is only when alcohol is in the service. If alcohol is not in the service, a substantial meal is not required.
So that goes back to the original point that we made. Cafes will be allowed to open, will be allowed to serve coffees, teas and the like, and as long as they're not serving alcohol, then they will be allowed to open as they would have been previously. Right, fine, okay. Let's just go back to that substantial meal question, because that again was probably the second popular question after seating arrangements. What is a substantial meal? Ruth, I don't know if you can hear us. You probably can. I just wonder if you're able to come off mute and to give us the legal definition on that.
I can do. Apologies, I've had problems dialing in this morning. Okay, so a substantial meal, there is a definition that already exists in Jersey law of a meal. It doesn't define what a substantial meal is, but the legal definition of a meal is breakfast, dinner or lunch, or something that is akin to those meals. So as previously mentioned, this will ultimately all hinge on what would happen if there was a prosecution and whether or not the plate of food in front of a person would be considered by law officers to constitute breakfast, lunch, dinner, or the equivalent thereof. So we are going to be producing some detailed guidance as to how this would work. So I think as a rule of thumb, anything that is just finger food alone would not constitute breakfast, lunch or dinner, unless it was for example, a sandwich and it had some crisps and a salad on a plate, but it would not be snack food, and it would not just be a piece of toast as constituting breakfast. So we will produce some guidance on this to help to ensure that everyone stays on the right side of what expectations are. But as I say, there is no legal certainty, so therefore it is always best to stay in accordance with the guidance that we will publish.
Okay, thank you for that, Ruth. One question that follow up to that from Sean, who's just come in, who just said, would tapas be included as a substantial meal? You can see where this all gets a little bit grey, and I think I'll come to Simon afterwards in terms of the industry wants to open, but this isn't about pushing boundaries. This is about playing the game, if I can use that loose phrase, which I know probably doesn't go down well with those who are studying law. But would tapas be allowed?
Well, I think that this will revolve on how much tapas. So if a person has a glass of wine and a plate next to them with 3 olives on it, I think that, if you imagine the situation where you are going to court, 3 olives on a plate does not constitute a meal. It constitutes 3 olives on a plate. However, if you are sitting at a table with a glass of wine and on that table was a variety of different tapas bowls, then clearly that would constitute a meal. So I think it's really important that everybody works together to make sensible interpretations of what is meant by a meal.
Right, okay. And in the end of the day, the argument will be settled in a court of law. And if it's going to a court of law, then the chances are it's in a grey area that you wouldn't want to go in. Thomas asks, will the collaboration between food and drink outlets be allowed in a similar way as to June last year? So for those who are used to June last year and the reopening, are there any differences to June last year to this time round?
I think it is that there will be nothing that will prevent a venue which is predominantly one that serves drinks, teaming up with a local restaurant or a local cafe so that they can serve drinks. And when I say drinks, I mean alcoholic drinks and food together. We will not be preventing that, but it will hinge upon it actually being significant and substantial enough to constitute a meal.
Grand. Simon, just going to pick up on that point about pushing boundaries, and in the, you represent the Jersey Hospitality Association. I represent Chamber. We both have members who will be very keen to open up as soon as possible, and very keen to, having had the long point where they haven't been open. It's about sticking within the guidelines and within the spirit of what is being required here.
Yeah, I think exactly that, sticking in the spirit. If you're trying to find a way of getting someone to stay drinking and trying to find loopholes, you are not following what is meant, the spirit of what is meant here. It's quite clear what is being told and what people should be looking for. They're sitting down, they can enjoy a drink with a meal. If you're there trying to find a loophole to get someone to sit down for longer or to just have a drinking session, you're going against the spirit of what's being done. This is not the time for that. There will be a chance to get back to full capacity and full operation at some point in the future, hopefully not too far away. But right now, we shouldn't be trying to push this. We don't want to step back. It needs to be a continual push to getting everywhere open. Now's not the time to push boundaries. It's time to follow the guidance.
Okay, lots of questions coming in. Thank you, Simon, for that. And this is Jersey Hospitality Association, Jersey Chamber of Commerce, joining together to solve some of the questions that you will be asking and getting prepared to open. Mark, I just want to come to you about getting prepared to open before I go back to some more of these questions. In getting prepared to open, this is an industry that knows its health and safety well, that is very used to running by food hygiene laws, and by the previous opening, and the question came previously from that, they'll have gone through this once before. Between now and that opening up period, the 22nd, what should restaurant owners, cafe owners, those proprietors of those businesses be starting to do now? Presumably having a checklist and working their way through it, but where do they start with this?
Yeah, we do have checklists that we have issued for all sorts of parts of the business. But if you haven't opened up a business for a while and you've been closed for a while, you've really got to check your fire security, fire alarm systems, smoke detectors, things like signage. You've got to look at, if you haven't been open for a while, look at your Legionella controls, running taps, emptying tanks, etc. And just check that you've got the right amount of sanitizer in the right places. Remember, we really recommend 70% or more alcohol content hand sanitizer. Make sure it's at the front doors, people at toilets where they can use it. And also, if you're using any sort of chemical to clean surface contacts or hand contact surfaces, please try and make sure it's compliant with EN 14476. This is a European set standard that says this is a virucidal. It will kill this virus. So please make sure you got your right chemicals, your wipes in place. And the other thing is you need to have a risk assessment. Make sure that's up to date and it reflects everything that's been going on the last few months. And most importantly, your staff understand that risk assessment and can comply with it.
Okay, EN 14476. I'm pretty
Yes.
good at remembering these numbers now. We've mentioned that one once or twice before, but that is the spec that you need to make sure that you've got
Yes.
the right cleaning product to make sure that you're being as safe as you possibly can. We'll talk checklists. Simon, the Visit Safe checklist is something that started off with Visit Jersey and of course with the Jersey Hospitality Association, and this industry will be used to this. But this has now been rolled out to other industries as well. So a good reminder for people to make sure they've got a Visit Safe checklist for hospitality opening.
Yeah, there's some great information on there. Caroline was part of the process of putting these together, and there was a significant amount of hours put into it. It works on things like reopening times. It does cover off your key points. It works on all the different points of your industry. It's free to download, free to sign up. You get use of a whole media library, which can be put on your social media, on your websites, as well as print off and used around the venue. It's a great scheme, and it really does help allow us to go through and just check off. And I mean, most people have fed back everything on the checklist they're doing already, but it's a nice way of making sure you're ticking off just to get that reassurance that you are up to the codes you need to be at the moment.
Right. We'll talk enforcement with the next question from Natalie. Natalie's question is, with the proposed checks on procedures and to ensure establishments are adhering to the guidelines with regard to table spacing, cleaning procedures, masks, hand sanitizers, who will be making these checks? Will it be the Honorary Police, which took place last year, or will it be someone from Environmental Health or other representatives from the government of Jersey? And also, when will these checks, how and when will these checks be done? So a lot of questions in there, but when it comes to enforcement, Caroline, how is that going to be carried out? Because obviously businesses want to stay on the right side of doing the right thing.
Yeah, and those that know me from Environmental Health know that our philosophy is always very much a case of working with industry to help them get to a point of not just compliance, but understanding what best practice is and identifying where they can apply that within their businesses as well. And so that's no different in this case. We've got our COVID safe team, who are actually our contact tracing team. So they're really experienced in terms of knowing the pitfalls, knowing where things can happen, where actually you find that you get a number of direct contacts within your businesses. And our experience has been very much that front of house is usually done really well. And then it's when you go, as soon as you're through that staff door, that's when matters have slipped. And that's where people have find themselves having to isolate as direct contacts if we've been in touch because of the positive case. And with that, it means that it's really, it's not going down the enforcement role. If we find the small number of individuals, small number of businesses that are taking the mickey and potentially damaging the sector as a whole, those ones we refer to the Health and Safety Inspectorate, and they'll consider what formal action can be taken and should be taken for those. And it really is small minority, but we with this visibility, with us actually being able to go about and see what's going on, find out how people are working, it means that there's a far fairer system in that respect. And I think one of the key thing is, if you know of a business that's actually not doing what they should be doing, tell us, because that's the key part of it. Is if we don't know about a business, they're potentially putting everybody at risk in terms of the whole industry, and it only takes a small number. But we're quite keen to take enforcement against that small number to support the vast majority of people that are actually trying to comply with the law and trying to do the best that they can do in terms of the guidance. And in terms of the teams, they're already out and about. So they've been going out since non-essential retail started to reopen. Those in Centralia might have seen them with the sort of tabards that they wear. And they've been doing things like Marc has said. It's about giving the advice and supporting businesses. And those that have invited us in, we've always been able to actually give them extra pointers as to what they can do to try and protect their workforce ultimately, which, there we go. Marc is supporting his tabard. So they are out and about already. And equally, if you want to proactively invite a team member to come and talk through what your processes are, whether that's before you want to open, you just need to email covidteam@govt.je, and we can work with you to plan that in, ideally before you're opening in many ways, because that's when you're quieter, you've got the time to talk to us, and so you can put those things in place before you get into the new way of people coming in and reopening fully. So collaborative sense checking before you open is the way forward. Yeah, we're quite happy to do that where we possibly can do. Absolutely. covidteam@govt.je. Correct. There's the number. There's the certainly the email address anyway. There's lots of questions coming in, and we're going to get inundated, and I won't get through them all unless we plow on through these. So these will be all over the place. But Sean says, can a restaurant run at full capacity if they've got space for 2-meter distancing in place with more than 40 people? So can they run at full capacity? So if you've got a restaurant that could run at 80 and they could have 2-meter distancing between tables of 10, could they run at that level? Ruth, I'm going to come to you on
that. They can indeed. So the law will require 2-meter distancing, but it doesn't set a cap on the numbers of people in any restaurant at any one time. But I think the thing that we just need to be clear about is the 2-meter distancing is not between tables. The 2-meter distancing is between people sitting at tables. So what you need to be doing is you need to be setting your table so that when someone is sitting there, the back of that person will be 2 meters away from the person at the next table. I'm going to follow up that question with and it was a question that came in earlier on, how does a restaurant, a premise, whatever it might be, enforce those tables of 10 to not mix with other tables of 10? Obviously, you've got the 2-meter distancing between the people, but it's very difficult, particularly in Jersey. Everyone knows everybody. It's particularly difficult in those circumstances to keep those tables apart. Presumably, that's going to be down to the enforcement of the premises, because they're the people there on the ground. Absolutely, and and we appreciate that this is going to pose a number of different challenges, because we're asking business owners to monitor and police the behaviours of their customers. And the legal requirement does actually fall on the business owner once the people are in the work premises to take all reasonable steps to keep those two people 2 meters apart. We are hoping that the emphasis on the fact that people need to be 2 meters apart rather than tables being 2 meters apart will help this, because it will mean that there is a distance between people, and it will just have to be a case of talking to your customers and asking them to comply. It's not an easy one, we know, but we are all keen that everyone plays their part and works together to make this a success. Simon, just representing your members in hospitality here, I'm assuming that really
it's going to be the potential risk assessment for that business is to work out whether they can actually manage that enforcement. They can manage that safely for themselves and their customers. That yes, we might have the physicality to have 100 people in tables of 10 and 10 tables with people 2 meters apart. But if it's difficult to manage that, then that's probably not a good idea.
You know, I fully agree, Murray. I'd always say we need to be careful with the word enforcement, especially when dealing with the works in our industry. We aren't trained for such, but it should be down to the venues to be, you know, talking to the guests and making sure they understand that we are operating under COVID guidelines at the moment, and they have to make sure they are doing their part. I've said this, and I'll continue to say it. This is also about personal guidance, not only venue guidance. Businesses are going above and beyond in a lot of places. But as the point was made before, you know, if someone goes and tries to hug someone else on another table, that's not a business breaching it, that's a personal breach. And I think we should all be just vigilant enough to say, you know, guys, let's please remember you're not meant to be doing that. We need to keep our distancing, and it should be a continual reminder at all stages. If businesses cannot operate as many people as they could potentially operate in a safe manner, I would encourage them to pick a capacity that they can operate and make sure they remain in control and keep everything within guidelines. Again, going back to the earlier point, while I know everyone is very keen to get some money back in the tills, we don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize this and put us with potentially weeks and weeks more of nothing coming in just to get a little bit more over one table. This is time to be just a little bit more vigilant. You know, we are moving very well through this whole process, but we just need to try and keep our heads on while going through this a bit further.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to go to contact tracing, which I know falls with you, Caroline. What is the status of collecting contact information? Previously, if someone refused to give details, then it was up to them, and they and the venue could still serve them. I think that it was due to data protection, says Ian. Is it now mandatory to have contact details? If someone refuses to give contact details, then you cannot serve them, or can you serve them? That's the first question. And then Rob said, full track and trace continues as before. Can we confirm that? Can we take walk-in bookings, or will all bookings have to be pre-booked?
So yeah, there's legislation in place that puts the requirement on. So it's a different situation to what it was in the summertime, where it was a strong recommendation. So there is a legal requirement to actually take details, and that, whether that's as a walk-in or whether that's as a pre-booked, is down to how a business is able to best manage that within their premises. There's no ban on people having to book beforehand. You can be a walk-in for that, and I appreciate that. Certainly for some cafe realities and places like that, that's probably a more likely scenario for them. But the expectations change from guidance to legislation. If somebody's refusing, the question is, do you want them in your premises in the first place? And can you talk to them about what the issues are, or say to them, well, that's a condition of you coming to actually eat in our premises. We need your details. Very much like Liberty Buses put a condition on saying you can't travel on our buses unless you wear a mask. So that's kind of the key elements of it. It's changed. It is more now as opposed to just guidance. But there isn't it isn't a you must pre-book to come to our place. It might make it easier for you to manage, and it might be a happier position for you if you're able to do that. But at the same time, it's not law. You can take the details when somebody does turn up, and there's lots of different pieces of information as to how best to be able to take details. We don't expect it to be bells and whistles as such. The point of contact tracing and the point of taking the details is that we can start that conversation with the individuals. It helps you and it helps us if you're able to access that information quickly. And the other part of it as well is it's really useful if you're able to actually know where the individual sat, to be able to reduce the impact on your other customers, and also for your staff members that may or may not have served them as well.
Mm-hmm. Thomas actually has come back to us with a question related to that. Regarding guidelines for collecting contact data, there are guidelines available, not just from yourself, but of course the Office for the Information Commissioner have got details on data collection and what you should and shouldn't be doing there, because it does fall into other things apart from health. Is asking one person per booking enough? I presume I can do online QR codes, or I could do old-fashioned pen and paper. Both are still permitted. Both are still available. Is that right?
I shall double check with Ruth in terms of the policy side of things. Certainly, we've always accepted that so long as one person, that lead person for the group, has given their details, it facilitates then the contact tracing from that point onwards.
And sorry, and this is Ruth, just to confirm, it's absolutely fine if it's only one person in the party, but that person does need to take responsibility on behalf of everybody in the party.
Thank you for that. 2 metre rule questions coming in again. Does the 2 metre rule apply to external eating areas?
The 2 metre rule does apply to the external eating area. So if the external eating area, because I know this varies from place to place, is actually part of the business area, the 2 metre rule applies, and it is up to the business to ensure that it enforces the 2 metre rule. If there is some seating which is outside the business area, so for example shared seating, that responsibility to stay 2 metres apart rests with the people who are sitting there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Simon, thank you for answering questions to those that have already been answered. So if you are writing questions in at the moment, Simon's busily typing away on some of the answers that have been asked already. There is one about 2 metres and minimum height perspex sneeze screens between. I haven't seen a sneeze screen, but I'm not sure I want to. Can tables be closer than 2 metres if back to back and there is a minimum height perspex sneeze screen between them? So would screens make any difference to the distance between? Or have we got one set rule here, which is 2 metres between people?
So we have one set rule, which is 2 metres between people. Sneeze screens are a really useful additional measure, but they are not instead of the 2 metre distancing. 2 metre distancing is still required.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different to last year, so that just needs to be highlighted in that respect.
Mark, I'm assuming that for those who have got the capability to put perspex screens in between, that's something environmental health can advise on as well in terms of positioning and getting that right, as opposed to it looking right but not being right.
Yeah, I'm just looking at screens. So there's just another thing to help the spread of the droplet that spreads this virus. Any mitigating circumstance like that to help would be brilliant. Certainly, I'd like to see sneeze screens at maybe customer payment areas, protecting your staff. But anything like that to help stop the spread is great.
Excellent. Some of the questions being answered by Simon live as he's typing, and some of them we're asking here, so we can get through as many as we can. Question from ER, whoever that might be. Will better enforcement focus be concentrated on public houses this time round to ensure seating is being adhered to properly and proper meals are being served, i.e. to avoid the repeat of crowding at the bar? Crowding at the bar is going to be a difficult one to manage, but it's seat service only. Ruth, am I right in saying that?
That's correct. It's seating service only, and that should work. And it's not just about serving food at seated tables. It's also about food and drinks being ordered at seating tables and payment being made while seated at the table.
In terms of just can you just go through some of the guidelines that we've got, Ruth? Because thank you for answering that. What we're talking about here is a 2.5 hour dwelling time from when you come in to when you leave, and food in front of that person during that time, because it's open to the vagaries of interpretation, no matter how much you put the guidelines in place. But what you're asking people to do is to have a meal. They can have an alcoholic drink with their meal, but some people have a pre-dinner drink and some people have an after-dinner drink as well. So how will that work within the guidelines?
So this was an issue that was raised this morning, and we appreciate that we need to go away and do a little bit more thinking over the course of today and tomorrow and clarify for business the issue around when an alcoholic drink can and cannot be served. because the policy principle here is to reduce the consumption of alcohol alongside a meal, because one of the things that we know is that when people have had too much to drink, they tend to talk more loudly, and their behaviours are such that they can present more risks in terms of COVID spread. So we need to go away and do a bit more thinking about what happens with regards to the serving of alcoholic drinks before there is food on the table, and also whether or not people can continue to order alcohol having finished their meal. And we will be issuing more detailed guidance on that tomorrow.
Right, look forward to that tomorrow. That's going to sound like an awful lot of work to write out that bit of nuanced guidelines, but I think it would be really helpful. Ruth, thank you for that. One for you, Simon. How can we avoid the clusters in hospitality that we sadly saw last time round? Is one of the questions that's been asked.
Thanks, Murray. I think what we have to understand is there was a number of ways that clusters appeared. Some of these will be very difficult to avoid even with good guidance in place. You know, there are ways that you're not going to prevent them. However, what we're looking at doing is trying to mitigate as many of the risk factors as possible. Trying to remind people, you know, if you follow the guidance issued to businesses carefully, the biggest breach point is going to be personal breaches. And again, it's just reminding people that they need to be adhering. You should not be going 2 meters to someone from a different bubble or from a different group that's in the venue. It's looking at, you know, with the guidance you've been issued, making sure you are adhering to it as closely as possible. You know, don't try and push anything. And I keep banging on about it today. Do not try and push boundaries. This is not the time to push boundaries. It's not the place to push boundaries. This is the time to follow and just try and operate within it. We know customers are going to try and get whatever they can out of this. They're going to really try and push us as far as they can. And it's just reminding us that we have these these regulations in place. This is not a time for us to be trying to encourage them to, you know, push whatever they can here. We will get to that stage soon. Just enjoy it while we can. Caroline, I know this is one of your favourite ones to deal with as well.
It is, absolutely, and it's a key thing in terms of, I don't know if you've seen the rose maps that can be created from these issues, but some clusters are 200-300 people wide, and they're really significant. What we've found on occasion is that things have been done right front of house, but then everyone's got together and had after work drinks together as a social thing within like the staff room, and that's actually been when we think the biggest risk of transmission has actually occurred. So it is, unfortunately, it means that it does take away the sort of fun elements of work in terms of being able to unwind at the end of the day, but making sure that your staff have got that understanding and that awareness that they really need to maintain that distancing between themselves, and particularly trying to keep different bubbles separate away from one another. So the kitchen staff stay away from the front of house staff and things like that to try and reduce the amount of potential spread, so that if you do have an individual test positive for COVID, that it doesn't have a sort of real significant business continuity impact on your business. And the other part of it is knowing through ensuring that you've got people regularly booked into the workforce screening, that you've got staff members going through that, so you've got that constant understanding of where people are within your workplace. With that, one of the things that we've dropped, although today's probably not a great day to call because it's the first day of the next tranche of the inoculation, the vaccinations, is to actually just get people booked in before they go back to work. So we're taking people out of that normal 8-week cycle and just saying, with your industry starting to reopen, it's going to be a one-off opening for you. Murray, I don't know if I'm jumping the
I'm smiling because it's as if you could see the question in front of us from Thomas.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, it's
we notes mentioned free testing for those in the workplace in hospitality. Is this on top of the 8-week workforce testing program where all the staff are already being, because they're on an 8-week rota, but because this industry is opening, I'm assuming that you want to get these people tested if you can.
Absolutely. I completely support and encourage you to get yourselves tested and get your workforce tested. It means that you've got a real strong idea of exactly where you are at the point of reopening, and it's far better to know at that point and protect the sort of wider part of your workforce than it is to find 3-4 5 weeks down the line, individuals are starting to show symptoms, and that's when you find that you've actually got quite a significant number of COVID cases within your workforce. So yeah, absolutely, it's outside of your normal sync. We've done exactly the same with children going back to school in January, but also the same for non-essential retail. It was offered to them and for them to be able to take up, and then the close contact services just before they opened up. So I wouldn't call today, because you'll probably find yourself having to queue for quite a while, and you'll be competing against people wanting to book in for vaccines. But from tomorrow onwards, give them a call. It's really simple. If you just ring 445566, that takes you through to the contact tracing helpline, and you can get it booked in through that respect, and be able to get your workforce tested and lined up for it before they come back into the workplace.
Excellent, thank you. And Thomas, that answers your question. 445566, probably from tomorrow is the right time to be doing that. Ross wants to take us back to once a table has finished their meal and their drinks. Here we go, Ruth. Are all of the group then banned from the restaurant for the rest of the day, or can they return later for dinner? And how will that be policed? So you've got people coming in for lunch, and they've had their 2.5 hours. And they've had their meal and their drinks. Is that them for the day, or could they come back and be customers later on?
There's nothing that we will do in law to prevent returning customers within a day. Obviously, there's a business decision for business owners to make as to whether or not they want returning customers, which they can potentially manage partly through their reservation system. But it's certainly nothing that we could control in law, because it is far too complex to do so. So yes, I guess theoretically you may get some customers who spend 2 hours over a leisurely breakfast, followed by 2.5 hours over a leisurely lunch. But obviously each individual business owner will need to manage its bookings and reservations accordingly.
Okay. Question about staycations, which I just want to air. I know Simon has already answered some of these individually, but in terms of staycations and people being able to book rooms, where are we on that at the moment? Is that something we're expecting?
We are making some decisions as we speak at the moment about what happens about reopening hotel accommodation. And we will hopefully be able to publish some information about the proposed reopening dates for hotel accommodation before the end of this week. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that it will reopen before the end of this week, but we will be able to give a better indication of when that is likely to happen before the end of this week.
Excellent. So this is stuff that's along the way. We're going to get there with this, but this is priorities first, is to make sure that we get the opening right first time round. Mark, your team is going to be going out. Can people book your team for a consultation? And if they can, I know they said there's a COVID team at Govt.je. There's an awful lot of people in hospitality. Have you got enough people to cover this and get round?
Yes, I think we have. We've got about 30 staff going out in pairs at the moment, and we're looking at training up more. So yes, book it up with us. We'll come and give you advice at any time. I think also look at your signage as well. I'd like to see it signage in front of every business at the front there, reminding people not to come in if they have symptoms of the COVID, the later symptoms, and also wear that mask.
Yeah, wanted to mention mask wearing because it's quite a technical difference between when you go into a place and when you can take your mask off. Ruth, just to reiterate this, you take your mask off when you are eating and when you are drinking, but the time around that, you must be wearing the mask in the restaurant.
Yes, so the guidance will be quite clear that masks should be worn at all times apart from eating and apart from drinking. So if you are lingering at your table for a long time, either before you start to eat or drink or after you start to eat or drink, you should be wearing your mask. Similarly, if you leave the table to go to the loo or whatever, you should be putting your mask back on.
Right, now that information is great for all of the people in the hospitality industry who are watching this, because they're going to have to monitor this and try and encourage this. But really, this is for the public, isn't it? Caroline, I'm assuming that we're going to get that message out to the public as well, because it's important that they know the rules as well. Otherwise, they're constantly being reminded of them.
Yeah, and we've got the comms units, we've got our communications team looking at the different messages for public, because it's absolutely everybody in Jersey needs to be sort of pulling together in this to be able to keep industries open. We saw just how quickly things can spread back in November and December, and I don't think anyone wants to go back to that, whether that impacts on business or, you know, the fact that that was a lot of very unwell people and the sort of the sad consequences of that. So I think we had a bit of a nasty shock just around that sort of time, but the expectations on members of the public to do their part is just as much as businesses supporting and facilitating that, and we need the two to work aligned. And if people aren't following the guidance, or if they forget, you know, it's perfectly understandable that people do forget, that it's perfectly reasonable that if a member of staff says, guys, can you just, you know, put your mask back on or something, that's done with the sort of care and understanding in which it's meant, that the whole point of them doing it is to try and help that the industry stay open, and to try and help the business, the place that they like going to still be there and available and to be able to do that. So it is a compromise, but yeah, the messaging to the public is equally as critical to this. We're all, you know, whichever side you're in there, we're all going places.
I'd like to add about the masks as well for the staff, that these disposable masks really won't last all day long. When they get dirty, when they get damp, they're ineffective. So staff should have access to, you know, the disposable masks at work to replace them. And if they're wearing the cloth ones, which are reusable, again, this really won't last all day long. Then they must take at least probably 2 or 3 with them to work, and then obviously bag them up and wash them on a nice hot wash when they get home, or biological detergent. So face mask signs and touching of face masks, etc., at the front should be a part of the risk assessment as well.
Thank you. As a members club, this was from Chris, I think we've answered this. We serve lunch and evening meals as a regular restaurant, but we're open for members as a membership club to enjoy breakfast, morning coffee, afternoon tea. Which of these is acceptable under the new restrictions? I can confidently say all of them. If you're not serving alcohol, if you're serving alcohol, it should be with a substantial meal. So hopefully that answers your question. Chris, have I missed anything out from that? Or have I rehearsed that by being taught it by you, Rob? No, I think I'm all right on that. Question that's come in, are conferences or meetings classed as a gathering of up to 10 delegates within this recent change? Or would this fall under hotel reopening and we need to wait for the next staff review? That's quite a good question, really. If you've got a small meeting and a small meeting room of 10 people, one's assuming serving tea and coffee, that's the same as 10 people sitting at a table and having tea and coffee. Ruth, am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So if you're hiring out small meeting rooms, you can continue to do so, but it is for a maximum of 10 people. And obviously you can't serve alcohol on its own if people are going to be eating.
Right, fine, thank you. That is that question answered. Back to the Q&As that we've got that have been coming in. Do kitchen staff need to wear masks while working? That one's for you, Mark.
Yes.
Easy.
Or a visor, yeah.
Masks or a visor, okay.
Yes.
I'm reading this. They go another one on masks from Simon. Regarding the requirement for staff wearing masks, are there any guidelines on which type of masks should be used and how often they should be changed? I think you've covered the changing bit, but in terms of the type of mask, there are a variety of masks out there, and some of them are more effective than others.
What we will do, oh, sorry, Mark, you answering that?
No, I'll let you go. You go.
I was going to say, what we will do is we'll make sure the written guidance sets out best practice advice about the type of mask that should be used, as well as how that mask is cared for, as Mark has previously spoken about.
One thing on that that's very quick to know what isn't effective is if you're wearing the mask and you can blow a candle out, it's not going to do the job as a very quick trick. So just bear that in mind. With regards to back of house kitchen staff wearing masks, if you really can't, if it's unsafe, if you're going to set yourself alight or something like that, then you need to consider what other things are you going to have in place to try and protect your workforce. And that's looking at the different parts of bubbling in terms of, do you have specific staff members? Do you stagger break times? All those sort of things, and that will be, I believe, included in the guidance that's going out, just to give you some thought processes. Masks are pretty much encouraged in every way, but if it's going to, like I say, if it's going to cause unintended consequences, so if it is a serious breach of health and safety elsewhere, if you're working with a lot of naked flames and getting down close to them, then the last thing you want is something flammable dropping off the front of your face.
I think what's becoming very, very clear from the questions we've had, and we've got upwards of 30 questions here, this industry is really keen to know what it should be doing, and those guidelines will be key. Natalie is back with another question. Front of house staff will be wearing masks at her venue. Will they also be required to wear gloves? Now, where do we sit on gloves, Mark? Are gloves essential, not essential, helpful, a waste of time?
I often see people with gloves on. They think they've got their glove on, they can do anything now. Just treat gloves as your hands. If you even with disposable gloves, clean them on a regular basis. I like to see regular hand cleaning, short nails, lots of hand sanitizer being used. But again, if you use disposable gloves, they get dirty, they're not effective, so they have to be cleaned, renewed on a regular basis.
Right, fine. Question from Mary: how can a chef taste food if he has to wear a mask?
Wear a visor. When we're saying wear the mask, you can take the mask off to taste food. I've advised people as well, if you've got to have a person who's hard of hearing or is deaf, you can take your mask off so they can lip read your supply, but obviously replace it as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. This has come up in other sectors, and no doubt we've learned a little bit about this now. Can staff have an exemption from mask wearing? Caroline?
Yes.
No, the legislation, unless we've going to say differently, but the legislation is quite specific with regards to members of staff. Members of public can have exemptions, but my understanding is that there's no exemptions available for staff members. So if you've got a staff member that's that would normally interact with members of public but can't wear a mask for medical reasons, then consider what alternative roles they could actually perform within the business.
Anyone anything to add on that? No, that's good. Okay, thank you, Sarah, for your question on that. Thomas wants to know, does having 10 people per table include children of any age?
It does. 10 people is 10 people regardless of their age.
Nice and easy. Simone says, if we encourage our teams to participate in a workforce testing, where do we stand if we say that we're not paying their salary in case they test positive? Ooh, talk to your employment advisor. I think lots of questions on that around there. And Simone, this is probably not all we can answer on that one. Caroline?
The only thing that I can say is that it's not legally enforceable that you can require your staff to get tested. But in terms of if somebody has tested positive, in terms of paying them, I don't know. We could possibly take that to colleagues within the benefits teams. I know that they do give payouts for those that can't work in certain circumstances. But yeah, that's possibly a little bit employment law for us.
Terms and conditions handbook.
Yeah, and it's Ruth here. And just to remember that if someone does test positive, they are, of course, required to self-isolate as a matter of law. So there's no way that someone who's tested positive can be in the workplace.
Right, thank you. How can we confirm if a guest's medical exemption have a medical exemption from wearing a mask? So a member of the public comes in, I'm exempt from wearing a mask. Should they have something that says that? Are you required to see that?
Yes, indeed, there is an exemption process, and whereby people can print off a form which sets out that they have an exemption. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're just going to be updating the guidance to business, so it's clearer for them how to recognise when a person does or doesn't have an exemption.
Thank you for getting through these questions nice and quickly. I can't believe we're 55 minutes of our 1 hour has gone, but it gives you some idea that we might be doing another one of these. Anonymous question here, but are masks, visors needed for outside seating areas for staff and guests? So outside seating areas, masks for staff and guests. Nodding from Caroline already.
The law requires that staff are wearing masks when part of their business. So if they're outside or inside, it's still within the premises of that business. Mm-hmm. I think that's the same for guests. I will double check to Ruth though.
It is indeed, yes.
Good. So yes and yes to that. Andrew, thank you for your question. We have touched on this subject, but just to reiterate, he says, we have full-size screens separating our tables. Is this acceptable? Can you give more guidance on screens between tables and whether that makes any difference? So Ruth, is this something we're looking at? Because I think screens and having physical screens between obviously is an extra health and safety benefit, if you like, but how much?
Okay, so screens are really useful because they provide extra protection, but having a screen does not mean that you are not also required to allow 2 meter distancing. And that's how it stands at the moment. I appreciate that it was different from that in summer, but at this point in time, 2 meter distancing is required regardless of whether or not you do or don't have a screen. And obviously, depending on how reopening goes and how our COVID journey goes, that may change over time. But as of when we reopen on Monday, screens, if you have them, are in addition to 2 meters.
Thank you. A couple of questions left in the last couple of minutes we've got left. Can you confirm if faith gatherings, including wedding ceremonies, church services and funeral services, can take place in hotels? Certainly, I mean, funeral services, that must be the wake. I see this rises from 40 from the 17th, and the gathering element that may follow would be a maximum of 10. Can you confirm if this includes hotels and restaurants? So where do hotels and restaurants sit when it comes to faith gatherings, including weddings, church services, and funerals?
Okay, so this is slightly complex. What is changing in the law is that an act of worship, a funeral service, or a wedding or civil partnership ceremony can be up to 40 people. And I think that, we need to be clear about this, is that what can be up to 40 people when it comes to marriage and civil partnerships, it is the ceremony at which a marriage or civil partnership is solemnized. So it's the actual ceremony. And for those of you who may be familiar, because you have hotels or venues that are licensed for weddings and civil partnership ceremonies, there can be no drink or food served during the course of the ceremony. So you can have up to 40 people during the ceremony, no food or drink served. If there is then going to be a reception post the legal ceremony, we then fall back onto the gatherings restrictions of 10.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that so conclusively. We're almost out of time. Thank you to everyone who's put questions in here. There will be more. We will take all of these questions and we will make sure that all of our panel gets these so that they can filter into the guidance. So you will have an influence in how that guidance shapes up. And I know Ruth and her team and Caroline and Mark and Simon are inputting into all of that, as our chamber as well. What would the message be, says M, what would be the message from each panel member to give confidence to the vulnerable members of our community that A, this is a safe step at this juncture of our island as a whole, and B, to encourage the vulnerable, that hospitality venues are a safe place for them to reconnect with as they're unable to do so in their own household. So there is that mixture here that you can't have households mixing in their household, but you can have them mixing on a table of 10. This has come up a couple of times on social media. We've seen it there. So what would the message be from all of you that the hospitality industry is going to be safe enough? Simon, you represent the Jersey Hospitality Association. You know I'm bound to come to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. the fact this is a safe step, I think it's been considered. They've agreed to do it. Stack has gone through this carefully. We've been closed for a significant period. They wouldn't be making this call if they thought there were still enough risks in place, where, you know, numbers are moving in the right direction. How do we do it safely, and how do we make people who are vulnerable feel like they're going to be safe? All we can do, and I've banged on about this throughout this whole webinar, follow guidance carefully, follow it to the letter, don't push boundaries, make people understand you're doing everything you can to operate in a safe way. You know, it's not just about following guidance, it's about understanding we are preventing the spread of COVID in the island currently. We're trying to stop this moving person to person. If you follow all the guidance and do what you can to make not only your staff, but also your guests and also government feel confident that what you're doing is to the letter or above, I think those who are vulnerable, although many of them, it doesn't matter what you put in place, will still feel at risk and probably won't take that chance until they're vaccinated. But I think if we can go above and beyond and don't let lapses or anyone breaking this come in, then we should encourage people to come out. That would be my personal view there.
Okay, Mark, I mean, we're all in this together. The public, those people who have venues who are keen to open, but yourself and Caroline and Ruth have got slightly different roles, which is why you're all on this panel. From your perspective and what you do in environmental health, what can you say that gives some encouragement that the process that we're going through right now is the right step?
I think just make sure you've assessed your business. If you want advice on that, we can help with the COVID teams. Make sure you've got your proper cleaning in place, your mask wearing, your cleaning chemicals, your cleaning techniques in between customers. And again, if you've got a vulnerable people, if you can put them nearer to a ventilated area, maybe nearer to the disabled toilets, whatever, just take into account the sort of people you may be coming in and have it as part of your assessment.
Temperature checking, worth doing, an added benefit?
I would always advocate that, of asking your customers, have you any symptoms of COVID-19? Anybody you live with have these symptoms? And we already do contact tracing. We take an infrared, so it's a non-body contact temperature of staff to make sure their temperature is fine, which is another indication of maybe a COVID issue. And it's a great thing to do if you can do it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Caroline, you've been on this journey for some time now with different sectors. This sector is a sector that is so keen to open up. But I guess from your side, you're very keen for it to open up as well, but safely.
Absolutely. I have tried to put forward the Keep Pubs Open for Caroline campaign. It's not quite got traction yet, but that's ultimately what this is about. You're a very visible sector, and it means that individuals can see, your customers can see what you are doing before making that choice of whether or not they come into your business or to not, and to move on elsewhere. And we've seen, through the use of Eat Safe, your visibility is something that you've been dealing with for years here, and it's something that customers are used to doing. So if a customer can see that you are 2 meters apart at your tables, people are 2 meters apart, that your staff are wearing masks, that your customers are wearing masks, it's before someone's even stepped in there, they can see and have that confidence that you are doing things that you need to be doing to follow that guidance to be able to reduce the risk of COVID cases or clusters being associated with your venue. And it is, eyeballs are basically, you're there in front of everybody, demonstrating those key initial parts that you are doing it properly and you are taking it sensibly. And like I say, we've got an island that's had a short, sharp, nasty shock recently, and talking to customers, they want to go to places where they feel safe. And that's a real key way of being able to demonstrate that confidence. And much as you do with other areas, get that repeat service. If you're doing it right and people feel safe to come to you, they'll come back again. The other side of that as well is that obviously we have the COVID safe teams doing the visits. And what that helps with is to keep that momentum. It's great to be able to get it all running and ready before you start opening week today. But what it does do is it means that you've got that in place, you've got it available, and it's not just for a week, it's for, you know, however long it needs to be until we're in a comfortable position. We've got vaccination going on at the moment. You'll know that if you try and ring the helpline today. We're getting there. So this is that visible, real critical part to just kind of maintain that momentum and just keep going. Soon you'll be able to get the outdoor spaces reopened. It's 14 degrees on Saturday, picnic weather. So, you know, we're coming into the easier season, I think, in terms of being able to sit people outside, but also in terms of people being able to come out of isolation and to winter isolation and come back out eating and drinking again.
Yeah. Remember, if you need to sign up to the Open the Pubs for Caroline campaign, then we'll send that on at some later stage instead, being all facetious about it. But thank you for that. Ruth, you've been spending an awful lot of time now second guessing the guidelines as to what people need so that they can operate safely. I guess that's going to be your role in this, is to make sure that the questions that people are asking now are the questions that they're going to need written answers for as to the guidelines of what they should be doing. So plenty of second guessing going on here of what they're going to need, but I think we've got a pretty good idea that we're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. We are all in this together. And, one of the things that we need as government is there will be questions that we haven't thought of. So, if you do have questions, if there's things that you need to know in order to keep your customers safe, in order to keep yourself safe, in order to keep your staff safe, let us know, and we will try our very hardest to answer you in the shortest possible time frame. And I think the other thing to say about the guidance and about the legislation is it's not always black and white. So if you're slightly unsure as to what you can do and what you can't do, err on the side of caution until you've checked it out with Caroline or Mark or someone else in government. Err on the side of caution, because we do need to keep each other safe, because none of us wants to go backwards here.
All right. Ruth, thank you very much indeed for all of that. This has been something that's been pulled together between the Jersey Hospitality Association and the Jersey Chamber of Commerce. And I think I can speak for Simon and I. We both get lots and lots of emails every day, and we are passing them on to Caroline, to Mark, to Ruth, and to many others as well. So they can, of course, just email us, and they've got all of our contact details from that. You're happy to have some more emails, aren't you, Simon?
Delighted.
Yeah. Good. We'll keep it at that. Caroline, Mark, Ruth, Simon, thank you. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. It's been a very, very good web chat, and we will no doubt be doing more. It is 1 week today. This isn't just thrown together. We knew it was a week today. And we look forward to more news coming out and those guidelines, and we'll try and get them out to everyone. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Murray.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.